Well, let's get more on the events of 12 months ago. Galip Dalay is the research director at the Sharq Forum. He joins us now in the studio. Galip, thank you very much for talking to us. 12 months ago, when the coup began, I believe you were sat in that very chair, and this channel was itself raided by soldiers and taken off air. Talk us through your experience of that night, not just here, but throughout the hours that followed.
Well, as you put it, like 12 months exactly that night, I was sitting in this chair, and we were talking about the ISIS attack in Nice, in France, when we were alerted that there was some kind of like unusualness that taking place. At the beginning, there was a sense of confusion. There was a sense of people were perplexed because people did not know exactly what is happening. And again, the idea of a coup can happen in Turkey of 2016 was a bit bizarre or a bit strange to the people's idea. It's not that this country did not have the coup. This country have a very long and extended period of the coup. It has like, many coups, 1960s, 1973, 1980s, 1997.
Was this one different?
It was different. It was different in a sense like in all the previous coups, the idea was to take the power from the political elites. Here you have seen the very symbol of the the parliament, the very symbol of the democracy was bombed. So in the previous coups, you would not bomb the parliament because you want to run the country still. You want to run the country from the presidential office, from the parliament, from the other institution of the power. But here the difference was that that's why it was a bit more like a full-scale terror campaign rather than just a coup attempt, because this very symbol of the political power in the country, or the very symbol of the democracy in the country, was bombed. So the fact that they could bomb the parliament, they could bomb the intelligence headquarters, they could bomb the special police headquarters, they could bomb the presidential palace, this is an alien not only to the previous coup in Turkey, but actually to the history of the country, to the history of most of the countries around the world, because for a very simple reason, the driving reason behind most of the coups in the world is to take the power from the current power holder and then to run the country. And of course, here you see the country being set against not just the political elites, but the people as well too.
And the Turkish government obviously claim it was Fethullah Gulen and his terrorist organisation, now designated as a terrorist organisation that carried it out. FETÖ, or Fethullah Gulen in particular, has been around since at least the 1970s and 80s, infiltrating the Turkish state. How was he able to get into a position to attempt this coup? Why was the organisation not stopped earlier?
It is a process that is going for decades, and very secretive, infiltrating the institution of political power in the countries, like making attack alliances with different groups within the countries. And the fact actually is not that it was not only the current government that was complaining about the activities of this group before. Almost every segment of society in this country, from the liberals to the Kurds, from the Kemalists to the leftists, almost every single segment of the society in one way or another have been victim of the Fethullah Gulen's presence within particularly the police and the judiciary. You see, from all this big judicial investigation that was previously taking in place, in all of them, the finger was pointing at the Fethullah Gulen organization for the irregularities that was taking place. So how did it acquire that much power? Actually, that's a question that should be, it will be a great topic for a PhD thesis or for a big report, because it is a very unique case on its own. The nature of it, the philosophy behind it, the theology behind it, the political psychology behind it, it's quite unique in its own. So is it esoteric? It's mysterious. So therefore, it's not very easy to answer this question with one word. I think for academic scholars, for journalists, one of the great topics of the interest would be to study this group with all its angles, because it is very strange. On the one hand, you have a group for the public consumption, from the pure consumptions, acquiring or adopting the language of democracy, tolerance, harmony, etc., etc. But it's exactly the same group that could bomb the parliament, that could kill people in cold blood, civilians on the bridge, that could like bomb the, the presidential complex. So it is not something very easy to understand by looking at it from outside and adopting our usual rational analysis faculty that we are adopting for other events.
So going forward then for Turkey, let's start domestically. Now that the organisation FETÖ has been crushed, I guess, for want of a better word, that's certainly the hope of the Turkish government. How does Turkey move forward from here? Because a huge number of people in the bureaucratic system, in the civil service, have either been fired or been arrested. I mean, they need to be replaced, I guess. How does Turkey build and go forward now?
Well, it's not an easy process. Let me start it with putting it that way, because we're talking about an organization that have deep presence, from the media to the civil society, from the military to the bureaucracy, from the religious institution all the way to the educational institution. So therefore, like, unless you understand such nature of this organization and their deeds, it's very hard to understand from outside. So at this stage, I think there should be like stages. One of them was the punishing or bringing the plotters, bringing this group to justice, to account for what they have done. So the punishment or to exacting justice is one of the requirements. So this is a process that is taking. But I think the hardest part will be to study, to work on this group in all its dimension, to make sure that anything like that will not happen in this again in this country, or maybe like, if possible, anywhere else as well too. So I think the second part of understanding this group and like to have a better judgment of this group will be a much more difficult task to achieve, because as I said, punishing is one way of dealing with this group, and it is, it's something crucial, necessary, because almost 250 people were killed, more than 2,000 people were injured, like parliament was bombed, the institution was bombed. So therefore, the one that has done this needs to be brought to the justice. But I think this is relatively the easier part. The hardest part will be to deal with this issue in all its aspects, like from the educational foundation that gives birth to it, the theological foundation that gives birth to it, the institutional foundation that gives birth to it, the structural foundation that gives birth to it. So this should be the process that Turkey should work on it going forward.
Okay, Galip, thank you very much for coming in late on this Saturday. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Galip Dalay.